If you've ever fallen through an elevator that didn't properly render, go ahead and hit that like button. While you're at it, if 2 empty cruise bottles is part of your EDC loadout, go ahead and smash that subscribe. This is ForgeCore Gaming, I'm your host Phoenix, and this is a review of the Scorpius from Robert Space Industries. There are very few ship designs throughout the sci-fi genre as iconic as the X-Wing. Since its 1977 debut in Star Wars Episode 4 A New Hope, the X-Wing became memorialized as a high-performance, deadly fighter earning respect and reputation on the battlefield. But to many, it was much more than just a ship. Taken up by the saga's main protagonist, it became more akin to a valiant steed from tales of old. Sort of like a shadowfax for the future, upon which the hero's travels and story development were heavily intertwined. Not to mention, it was just downright cool. Which is why I believe most people can't help but to stop and take a second look when they first come across the RSI Scorpius. With its bifold wing design and streamlined hull, the Scorpius represents more than just a ship. It represents an opportunity for players to indulge themselves in nostalgia and maybe, just maybe, carve their own path and create their own story in the Star Citizen universe. I have to admit, I was excited to hear that one of my org mates already had the Scorpius available in his ASOP terminal. Though I'm not opposed to blind impulse buys, this is one of the only ships that I've actually intentionally saved up AUEC to purchase in-game. Most other ships that I bought with AUEC were just because I had extra, and were the product of running ERTs and Vaughn missions when Weevil eggs were dropping by the truckload. But recent changes to their drop rates had made it a bit more difficult to come by copious amounts of credits, so this one was becoming a bit of a grind, especially since I made it a goal of my Starlancer Max Liveaboard series, which limits how many ERTs I'm allowed to do in the first place. Now, I'm really not going to focus on the exterior of the ship. The main design feature has already been discussed, and I think anyone watching this video would have known what the ship looks like, even if I hadn't. No, this video is focused on performance, and performance starts on the inside, so let's hop right in. Right off the top, I can tell you the visibility in the ship is astounding. Though it's pretty standard in fighters to have full visibility around and above you, the Scorpius's cockpit, following its namesake, has a sort of pincer-like configuration at the front that allows for a pane of glass to bisect the cockpit, providing added visibility below the natural eye line. Even with that loss of real estate for MFD placement, we still have a sensible amount of information available at a glance, without the need to look away from what's in front of us. Now, if you've seen my reviews before, you know what kinds of guns I like. Luckily for me, my org mate has the same taste, so this was already outfitted with attritions all around. In its stock configuration, the Scorpius has combined 1,584 DPS, equally dispersed amongst the pilot and the turret gunner. When switching to attritions, that DPS jumps to 2,968 at the expense of projectile velocity, which some players mark as too much of a trade, but I really haven't felt the impact of that, as my PvP experiences have been limited at best. Now, I had heard around town that the turret, when unoccupied, might be able to be slave to the pilot, which would have been huge in making the ship viable, but unfortunately that isn't the case. If you have no co-pilot or gunner, you're just out half of your ship's potential DPS. So if you're going to run solo, make sure to unequip the turret guns to save on energy requirements. With that said, I didn't do that. Even still, I was able to max out energy to the laser repeaters and shields with 1 pip left over to give a small buff to engines. Even with the energy maxed out, however, I only had a little over 30 shots for each of my 4 guns affixed to the wings. which was a bit of concern as I queued up a VHRT to test out the ship's capabilities in higher tier combat. Going into the fight, I knew I had to be somewhat careful as I only had 4,740 HP bubble shield, meaning it would not take a considerable amount of incoming enemy fire to deplete my shields completely. On top of that, I had heard plenty of stories of the characteristic bifold wings being exceedingly fragile, such that if your shields were taken down, your wings would likely be blown off quickly thereafter. Still, I charged into battle, insisting on finding out if this ship had chops. Now, ships in VHRTs tend to have a fairly high amount of shields that took several cycles of volleys and recharge to take down. And even after taking down the shields, it took even longer to do considerable damage to the ship hulls. I found myself spending upwards of 5 minutes or more to take down something like a Carrack, which in most of the other ships in my fleet would have gone down in about 3, if that. What it boiled down to was the very limited gun capacitors that only allowed for short bursts of fire before needing to recharge. This was only exacerbated by the need to keep moving because, as mentioned previously, any continuous fire from larger ships would lead to an early demise. Which admittedly would have been fine if not for the fact that this ship isn't the most maneuverable thing out there. While it isn't necessarily bad, as its max unboosted SEM speed is 220 meters per second, and its pitch, yaw, and roll are 38, 35, and 140 degrees per second respectively, the Scorpius felt a bit on the heavy side. And even though its mass is lower than that of something like the F-8Z, which also has considerably more firepower, it just didn't feel terribly responsive. So my repositioning would take longer than expected, which gave enemy shields time to do a bit of recharging, and given the fact that my solo DPS was sub 1500, that recharge time stacked up fast. Regardless, I was able to finish the VHRT without taking any hull damage, but I was left feeling underwhelmed by the performance thus far. Based on my observations during the flight, I also wanted to further check out its maneuverability without combat being a factor. So I took it down to a moon surface and found some mountains to fly around. Now this is a heavy fighter, so I wasn't expecting too much out of it, but it also looks like it has an aggressive flight profile, so part of me still wanted it to be good. Here's what I found. I never felt like I was moving particularly fast. In fact, when I was in SEM mode, I felt slow, like very slow. Particularly when I wanted to change direction, which is crucial in a PvP scenario. Now the majority of my flying was in coupled mode, as I was planet side, but I did try decoupled mode a few times, and that, well, it ended in me crashing pretty quickly as the Scorpius just has a ton of inertia. But honestly, that's okay. As stated, it's a heavy fighter. It isn't really intended to be super maneuverable, it's intended to fight craft a little bit larger than itself. Which brings me to the most serious issue that the Scorpius has. It doesn't actually do anything terribly well. Now hear me out. Right now, yes, it can hunt down medium to large ships. But engineering gameplay is right around the corner, allegedly, and with it, we'll start to see armor ratings. Ships of different sizes will get armor of different types, and certain size guns won't be able to penetrate armor of a certain rating. So capital and large ships will likely be off the table for the Scorpius. Medium ships like the Corsair will be fair game, but make one mistake and that Corsair is taking you out. Other large fighters simply outpower this, and anything medium or below outmaneuver the Scorpius by a healthy margin. So if we equalize pilot skill, in most circumstances the Scorpius just loses, again, by a healthy margin. And at a real world price of $240, that's a problem for a lot of people. Now that doesn't go to say this ship doesn't have any intrinsic value. Though it may not be the top performer, nor is it even in the conversation, everyone plays this game with a different vision in mind. And though there are arguably best in slot builds and ships, I know for a fact that a lot of us would prefer something that makes us smile when we retrieve it from the Aesop tournament. For me, that's a ship like the Starlancer Max. Every time I pull it out, I can't help but get excited for what the day ahead of me holds. Without question, there are better ships available to accomplish the same or similar tasks, but frankly, I don't care. Furthermore, I myself wouldn't be caught dead in a connie, but I'm 1000% aware of why it's so popular. It just isn't my cup of tea. It doesn't scratch the proverbial itch I have as the primary reason behind me being so invested in Star Citizen. And that's part of what makes Star Citizen such a special game. I've been playing MMOs since 2002, and every single one of them falls into the same, for lack of a better word, trap. And that trap is that by the time you get deep into endgame content, you've become what can be essentially termed as a carbon copy of everyone else around you. Besides cosmetics, there really isn't a reason to use anything other than the best item available, and that just isn't the case with Star Citizen. There are hundreds of ships and thousands of loadouts and innumerable reasons to choose the ship that suits you best. Even if that reason is just because you want to. So after my tests on the Scorpius, I decided to take some time and enjoy what I liked about it. And despite its flaws, I can give it this. It's just cool. And that's enough. With that said, I think I'll end this review. Let me know what you think of the Scorpius by dropping a comment below. Do you have one? Do you want one? I'd love to hear from you. Just a friendly reminder that all subscribers who like and comment on any video published during the month of December will be automatically entered to win a ship during my Christmas Eve giveaway. I'm not sponsored by anyone, nor am I partnered, so I haven't decided on which ship it'll be just yet, but we'll have to find out. With that said, please leave me a like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. We're going to keep going strong with this channel so long as the community wants us here. As always, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the verse.